It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to it, your Feel Good Breakfast Show. We're live, large and in charge. It's a Tuesday morning. Thank you very much for choosing to spend your time with us. We are entering the last 45 minutes of the show, but the excitement continues.
And we're still getting inspired. Joanne Joseph, who we were just saying earlier on, I mean, is practically one of the most iconic personalities from our radios and our TV screens. And Gutle's out in Johannesburg, catching up with her book, Children of Sugarcane.
Absolutely.
It's a hit. Check this out.
And we're back, coming to you live from Johannesburg. Igama lami nguKuhle Adams. Namhlanje, we have the honor of starting the morning with South Africa's most pristine radio and TV personality, Joanne Joseph. Earlier on, we got to know her and experience in the media space for over 25 years. And now we're about to delve into her second offering, Children of Sugarcane. Joanne, let's get into it. What is Children of Sugarcane all about, and what inspired you to write the book?
So the book is about an indentured labourer who came to South Africa in the 1870s. You might know that at that time, during British colonisation in both India and what was then Port Natal, they brought a number of Indian people over to this country, just over 152,000 people between the years 1860 and 1911. And they laboured in various British enterprises here, including the sugarcane fields, on the Natal government railways and so forth. And so this is the story, a fictional story of a young woman who at the age of 14 decides to escape an arranged marriage in India to come to South Africa and take up indenture here.
You've mentioned that the book was inspired by your great-grandmother. How did you manage to put yourself in the shoes of a rural woman back in the 1800s?
So we knew nothing about my great-grandmother at the beginning. I mean, this was my maternal great-grandmother. My mother had very little information about her. We had a little snapshot, a headshot of her, and that was about it. And that was what stimulated me to start the search for her, so that I could give my daughter a greater sense of who she was and what she had actually done with her life here as an indentured labourer in South Africa. And so that's how the story came about. And of course, it required quite a lot of research to find out what life was like, both in rural India, but also in colonial Natal, which looked quite different to what we now know as KwaZulu-Natal.
The subject matter of the book is also entangled with your own history. How did you manage to navigate the emotions that came with the writing of the story?
It was quite a difficult story to write. It took me 9 years. I mean, that's partly because historical fiction is such a difficult genre in which to write. Well, so it was for me anyway. But you're also processing all kinds of brutalities and atrocities that took place during colonization 160 years ago. And that is quite difficult. What is most searing about it is that you are reminded all the time that this happened to real human beings. And when you process that information from the textbooks and you remold it into a narrative, you're all too aware that this is what your ancestors suffered. Real people went through these atrocities and the hardship around them, and they survived them. And there's something quite miraculous about that. So it was a difficult text to write. And at times when it became too emotionally difficult, I walked away from it and then walked back towards it later on when I was stronger. And that's how I ended up with the text in its current form.
Why was it important for you to turn the fact into fiction?
But the reason I decided fiction was the genre in which I was going to write was because I just couldn't gather enough information about my great-grandmother. So it might have been a non-fiction book had I known what actually happened in her life. But I mean, I see her arrive in the archives. She's there on the Laurel Madras in 1884 with her younger siblings. She's 21 or 22 years old. She is sent to work with her siblings on the Natal government railways, and then she disappears for 30 years and reappears 30 years later in a textbook in which she has accomplished quite a number of things. But that meant that there was a massive gap in her life that I just could not fill, other than to fictionalize the story and to bring her story together with the stories of several other indentured women and make my protagonist Shanti a kind of receptacle for all those amazing stories.
You spent 9 years writing this book, going back to it and revisiting the text to change certain things and details. Are you ultimately happy with how it turned out?
I don't think I can ever be happy. I was doing a reading last night in which I read an extract of the book and I thought, oh, this needed one more edit, but I think I'll never be satisfied. What I am satisfied with is that in some way it has managed to center the conversation around indenture in the country. So hopefully it's doing the work of informing people about a part of our history that we didn't really know much about. And it is, many people who engage the book are saying to me, gosh, why didn't I know? And it's because the information hasn't been easily accessible to us. We've got a lot of historical record in terms of indenture, but it hasn't made its way into fiction very widely yet. And the previous writers around indenture have really struggled to inject their literature into the mainstream South African canon.
We know that you are representing South Africa at the Gothenburg Book Fair in Sweden. Please tell us more about the event and what you'll be doing there.
I'm looking forward to it, Kuhle, but I'm going to have to pull out the winter woolies again because the temperatures are sort of between 14 and 17 degrees every day. Those are not pleasant temperatures for a former Durbanite, but I'm sure I'll survive. But I'm going with an amazing group of artists, writers, poets, and so forth. And I think it's going to be really inspiring to travel with them, to put South Africa on the world stage. The theme is South Africa this year. So we're looking at South African literature in detail, very microscopically. There are going to be lots of exciting sessions where we get to talk about our country, our literary heritage, its cultures, how we are going about telling those stories. So I'm really looking forward to that interaction with the Swedes.
That sounds really exciting because one thing about South Africa, we are rich in history, heritage, tradition, and culture. There are so many stories to tell. Well, Joanne is not going anywhere because after this, she will be sharing some of her favorite vegetarian recipes with us right here on your Feel Good Breakfast show. Ninga Indao, so dibana shortly.